Good afternoon. One more day, by the request of some of you, I will continue to speak of in the cultural sphere of Gemmeconomics under the development of the Gemmfiles. But before I start, let me also make some new adjustments, more so about the way I perceive what is happening with the current technology involving AI and the algorithm, the speed, the computation, tabulation, all of the very crucial importance. Just as much right now we can handle the mass volume of data, including YouTube granting us the space to tape videos and to communicate, plus the massive storage system. At this moment, is being hosted onto YouTube, but in the coming months, we'll be making making changes accordingly. What is happening? The old term, even paradigm, becoming an old term. What we are doing is basically repeating what had been done in 1,000 years ago, be the time of the Western culture of Greece and the time of the Chinese of the 500 BC, all around that area. Most of the teachers, mentors, the way I will continue using this terminology about how the teaching of Confucius, the teaching of Lao Tzu, you recognize him as the gentleman, the emphasis of the Tao Te Ching and in the old terms, Taoism or Taoism, Tao. Also the teaching of Buddha. The reason why I'm saying the teaching of the three grand masters in the context, in the Chinese cultural sphere, none of them have any input from any religion, including Buddha himself. So this is one of the major cross-cultural global gap that is in existence. This is the part where my passage, where my life history involving the study of psychology, educational psychology, cross-cultural psychology, had given me another tool to do the analysis. Is about the Sigmund Freud's projection. Oftentimes, as we can see here today with the global conflict, where the US is accusing all sorts of abuses of China. And let's put it bluntly, it's all about demonization in the four basic policy that US have tried. After all, I lived in here for 50 years. First is the American global policy about the Monroe Doctrine. It is the policy of a hegemon, with no one allowed to come into the Americas and put any kind of influence onto the nations south of Mexico all the way down to Patagonia in Argentina. The second policy, which is a kind of a silly, is the zero-sum game. From a psychological perspective, if I am not number one, I become zero. If you have me defeated in whatsoever grounds, be that in the economic dispute, military challenges, and now even science, and also on the current technology about various boycotts and blockade about China. Well, after a WTO in the longer term, when we are all experience the fruition of the globalization leading by the US and responded by the Chinese, become the two major economic players. However, by design or not, maybe American thought that globalization meant to be the Americanization of the globe, leading by money, by the petrodollar, where again, as nobody can challenge the printing of the US dollars. That's part of the American economic hegemony. Well, somehow, by way of China, with my company's business starting in 1977 and today, I use this 45 years personal history, is riding almost at the same time when China starting to come into the world and becoming now the second largest economy. And there will be other interpretation that China's economy already has surpassed the US. The third policy, we're talking about the Monroe Doctrine. We talk about the zero-sum game. Now we talk about the American exceptionalism. I found this to be very peculiar. It's almost very similar to the Israelis' Zionism. It is almost like we are chosen. We're the only one. We are the blessed. Nobody can surpass us. I mean, that's fine. If you can live with that sort of conviction, you believe in you're the best. But I think to be the best must have some kind of character regarding to humans' values and moralities. But that's another story. And the latest one is all about the neocons or the neoliberalism, where Americans continue to try to force our form of democracy with the Arab Springs, with all the color revolutions. And somehow, I hope in what I'm talking, one of my major topics is the pedagogy I'm writing, I'm talking, I'm composing in the use of the ChatGPT and other components. Help me structure better of the idea, the pedagogy or the teaching, the mechanism about conscience. Let me repeat, conscience cannot be taught. Conscience is coming out, the inner thinking of man, the multiple thinking of man, the reflective thinking of man, the introspection thinking of man. And accidentally, by the West not being able to perceive what is China, the total opposite of the Western ideas is the Chinese teaching of conscience, cultivating conscience, which is the language of the heart. And this focus has been done not just by the major three value-setting teachers of Buddha, Lao Tzu, Confucius, and before that, coming from the time and mythological or the Shah era of the people can talk about Yi Jing, how the nation and its culture shaped by this dynamic thinking. And I will repeat here one more time. The Chinese writing of one is a horizontal stroke. The two, when you cut the stroke in half, it becomes two strokes, creating opening. We can relate that to a female genitalia. And so to speak in China, the one bearing two, two bearing to three, with three, everything creates, everything starts to propagate. Basically, in part of the biological aspect, when you insert the one into the two, all things, all universal system of things to become reproductive. And phonetically, the number three, and I'm using in Cantonese dialect, is Sam. And the birth or life is Sang, Sam. It's almost sound like with the number three, everything start to propagate. So in this, in what I'm speaking, sharing my 45 years of my cross-cultural existence with the gemstone business, with the mineral business, relating to the specimen collectible business, to the jewelry manufacturing, to the understanding of the precious metal and its influx of value. And I will continue today. But my two major cultural hub is the pedagogy of conscience, my topic about conscience. And on this side is about the system of Gemmfile, which I have been developing for the last 33 years, or ever since 1991. That was the year, we're already 14 years into the business, when we grasped the huge importance with the entry of the internet and with the use of the software and hardwares, predominantly the learning about Microsoft's spreadsheets. Spreadsheet is the mother of data for any business. And in this interplay from this cross-cultural experience, continue enrich my development of the counseling theory, 1974-75, called the 3 C's. And now I will be turning to speak how the psychology round and square has been developed. The psychology of round and square is basically a universal language that we can use it for advising, counseling, interpersonal, intergroups, intercultural groups. And just give you a very basic example. The psychology of round and square, when that was developed in the context of the 3 C's, without myself being a little bit more reflective and cultural anthropologically, more so for my cultural origin from China. I will repeat, I'm born in 1948, Shanghai, coming from a bicultural linguistic mother's Cantonese, father is from Yuyao, next to the city of Ningpo in the province, Zhejiang, very close to the wider arena of Shanghai. Shanghai is an independent city, and the people coming to Shanghai, the next two provinces is Jiangsu and Zhejiang. So with that being said, from the early hearing the different tonalities in the entire household, with many multiple dialects among the household staff, mother Cantonese, father Zhejiang, and we're in Shanghai. My father is also a French graduate from Sorbonne. Our engagement with the foreign nationals, I'm taking a little bit of this into the future into Hong Kong, Macau, and then also our multicultural engagement in the city of Sao Paulo, Brazil. So, but what I'm talking about, the conscience relating to the psychology round and square. Let me give an example. The dynasty, 3,000 years with the multiple dynasty, with the multiple ethnic entrance into the two river valley area, Yellow River in the north and Yangtze River, which flows exit through Shanghai, is the Yangtze River, which is another very rich cultural, with great evidence from my area where my father's home village, the discovery of the culture called Liangxu, where it shows its existence 5,000 years, longer than the time when Shang dynasty had the written record shown with the oracle bones written on tortoise shells, animal bones, and so far the 40,000 characters China had, even starting of the 1800s, eventually decoding no more than 4,000 to 5,000 characters. These numbers are maybe a little off, but we can, as always, in the open book format that we're going to have, whatever minor mistake I made can be eradicated. I will talk about how that is being done, how the new format by this speaking terms, we're going back to the Greek and Chinese, the orator speaks, often having a much broader dimension than the scriber. That does not diminish writing, but today technology is giving us both. After this take, we can put that into narratives if and when collaborating with YouTube. If not YouTube, there will be others. We can creating another formats by way with Patreon, by way with Vimeo. But the future of educational format will going back for those who can speak, who care to speak, who share their knowledge in the speaking format, can now technological wise, we can have it totally into written forms and using even features that I'm barely aware of, synthesis here, and that can turn into the multiple language by adapting even from your mouth, your bocal in Portuguese, your lips can be totally adapted. Technology is available, so it's no longer the dependency in this past 300 plus years. The global language is dominated by the intruding, offensive, invading forces of the power of Anglo-American plus Judaic. Right? The Judaic part is because of the economics factor. More so, if you're Chinese, you think about opium, you think about what family have manifested to the greatest. The money, the finance, the East Indian Company, and then to the opium trade in the city of Shanghai, what Sassoon had done in the Shanghai, even though the major money makers out of opium, more than just a Jewish family, is the Scottish family and also the American families. They hide behind the China trade, so they would not have to speak of where the wealth coming from the opium. But again, the what we have today, even by me speaking, not out of terms, maybe slightly off the precise, concise record in numbers, and that's part of the oral history. But today, when there is a question mark, a flaw, by my creation of the open books, where in any format, if you allow your book, if the author allowed the books to be created electronic forms, if that book, be that by chapters and pages, can be assigned by college professors, high school teachers to study, and then in that format, all students can insert. When you insert on the written form with your name, your identity, your ID that you are part of this domain, your teacher given that lecture, and references from the school, because everyone's input will have merit. Because I have often found in all these years when I do my reading, very frequently I start flowing into a daydream, used to call. What happened is that some part of the book trigger another idea that I have and just threw me off, not being able to continue to the text. But this is fascinating because with the technology today, if you have an idea, you can expand from what I have written. Even languages. For example, for the longest time, I remember very well the Chinese words about tu teng, and correlating to the English term called totem, the totem pole of the Northwest American Indians. And totem or tu teng means tu is picture, teng is raised. So all the works from the Northwest American Indians with the totem poles, with the carving of the animals, with relief, immediately took me to the work of the Mayans in Central America, in Mesoamerica, with all the configuration totally, when the raised picture by carving indented, well, much the same I've done in China. So the word totem, even now with my request inquiry, sharing with the ChatGPT, with sharing with Claude, and sharing with Google's Gemini and others, I'm still thinking with 80% conviction that my idea of the word totem has a lot more validity linked to the Chinese than in the American form. Putting totem is the original word from the tribal group, the Ojibes, north of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and to Canada. Another word, I think this is hardly any dispute. The word ketchup, that is 100% Cantonese. Ke means tomato, zup means sauce. So ketchup, ketchup, ketchup. That become, I think that the ketchup coming with the Chinese origin is not so much dispute in that. And in this learning, in the development of the oral speeches now, or sharing, commenting into the electronic form, and in 2 hours, that's normally the time, this can be recorded onto the YouTube. And then in the next round, this can be printed. So eventually, PaulYee.ai / can be having a specific topic, including the speaking engagement in oral history, now can be done in the written form. And that written form can be a part of a dynamic structure to allow other ideas to flow. You may come and say, no, I disagree at that point. If you want to write in a critical but constructively, you can put that into a red ink, italic, whichever form you want to do, or you can use a highlighter to express. Will develop a cohesive language in the sharing of my comment about your work. What is my input? And the teacher definitely will have much more to gain, and the students to see the work of the student, their input, their comment, their criticism, their add-on values to a specific topic. Because history, as I will repeat, what I'm talking even in the next half an hour or so about the Gemmeconomics, WM, coming up from Gemmfiles, is still in bits and pieces. Of course, these bits and pieces you can remember, the better you can, the more you can describe it, the better off the subject matter will be of value, where people can share, people can identify, or even challenge them to that. They're thinking and say, wait a minute, I think I can have some input here. The search for knowledge, our own mechanism in search of knowledge, basically in this format, we will continue to validate ideas or events that we can enrich and enhance. What we have learned can be shared by the public. If there was 500 people watch what I said about totem, they will do their research. And the researchers who have previous conviction in written formats may want to make some changes. I may not. I mean, again, fear not to make mistakes, but the most important part of it, to present what we present in the most, honest way, in the most open format. So knowledge will continue to flow. And here, for example, the simple things, what I constructed my 3 C's into a, now I call it universal language, which can be spoken by the collective language in the middle of the Amazon in Upper Rio Negro, we call it Ninkatu, or going to another group to Tupi Guarani, or the Mapuches in the Andes in Peru and Chile, and also into other native groups, because I described when the three round shapes, borrowing the Freudian superego, which is culture, ego is I, and then the ID is the physiological, biological hunger, needs, all that from the ID, which is the most trouble when we're not being able to balance that biological urge, and namely the sexual dynamics by Sigmund Freud. But I just go back to very simply the language I created, because it's round, we get along, and square when I'm questioning what you're presenting. But this, remember, we have 60,000 stimuli receiving, giving, average per day per person. So this are the, I was not wrong about communication dynamics, but now you can put this into a another platform where it's round and square. Put it very simply, round and round, we get along. The big rounds, teacher, big rounds, small students, coach, player, okay. Adult to adult is two rounds, depending on proximity. In the Western culture, because we're on horseback, one hypothesis, the American riding on horseback in the Western, hello, hi, greeting from a distance, not even talking to the natives. Handshakes is another format of communication going back to the medieval, the earlier days when the Romans shaking hands were like such, meaning I give you my arm of violence, my arm fighting, and the handshake is basically is an offer of peace. In by me growing up in Latin America, we most men, good friends, we always hug. That means that you open your todo, frontal, trusting embrace, you hug, you tug, you depending how tight, how long, or it's a form of trust. Okay. And with the women, we kiss two sides. I noticed mostly in other countries in Spain or so, the one side that maybe this adaptation coming up or by the origins of the Italians. And then one time or another in the 60s in Brazil, when we kiss a young girl, oftentimes by the affectionate cousins and aunts, they kiss one more time, two plus one, and the third one is that baragaza, wishing you happy marriage. Well, those are the days involving dowry and preparations, the debutante dance. You know, the that particular baile debutante is taking a young lady into the society, and then in the U.S. and among the Mexican, we have the quinceañeros, the 15-year-old festivity, all that. But going back to the basic round and square, where I have adapted from the observation of the global events also. In China, for example, when the country of the dynasties rising, when we value the Han dynasty, many Cantonese in North America still referring to each other, oh, we are Tongyan. We are the people from the Tang dynasty. Well, let me put the Tang and the Han with that very related period is the most culturally and economically and literally most dynamic time of China. So you're rising up, you're in the shape of round. One time in history of Tang Dynasty, there were no robbers. The country is so peaceful. Nobody robs you, nobody steals from you for goods. However, there were people that will steal and take your calligraphy, your poems from the many poets. Talk about literati, the rate of the high literacy of the Chinese. They were taking your poems and your calligraphy and your writings and to have them have the reselling value. So round is when we are complementary, when we're getting along. But the end of a dynasty, you can see by the repeated many times the infighting, between the in-laws, between the queen and her family, her brothers, her cousins, some of the most incompetent people, and the eunuchs who got very close to the courts. And all that is the rise of an expansion in round, and then you draw your limits. And also you can look at order is order, and O. And law are written with the L's. Law is the square, order in the center. When there's order, there's no law. Our neighborhood, our friends, we coexist because out of respect, a certain kind of a ritual, a certain kind of unset rules that we respect others' property, other people's distance, and so on and so forth. Another point to highlight the use of the psychology of round and square. Look at the game that we play almost every day. The American football, the international football, we call soccer. All the courts are square, but the ball is round. Yeah, the ball can go anywhere. You can kick the ball 10 miles in the air that comes down, playing in that square can be played. Same thing in tennis, same thing in ping pong, same thing in volleyball. The ball is round, but we play within the respected rules and the size. What if we can changing basketball into different leagues? The center of the basketball had to be under 6 feet. Well, there'll be different dynamics. There can be a wonderful events for people who want to play. It can be imaginative. The tallest center of any basketball team cannot be taller than 6 feet. Then what? Then you have much quicker moving game and faster cadence or pace. So the dynamics that I create about round and square. Let me repeat this. I do not take everything I have created or I have dreamed of and make it into an eventful or memorable or eventually applicable form. But all is coming out from this so-called nature. The exposure, the psychology of round and square has always been in my mindset. And the Chinese word, the regulations, kuiju or kuigu in Cantonese, is all about round and square. So when we are given the confined area to play, and you can play as hard as you want, sometimes those playgrounds are not marked. Such parents taking youngsters to the beach. Be mindful of the water, be careful with the wave. We keep a watchful eye. So this kind of a borderline limitations and the freedom of movement are often just created by men. So the psychology round and square and the development of the cross-cultural psychology based on my familiarity with the 5 languages and the multiple dialects in Chinese and so on and so forth. And that had taken me when I started my gemstone business, I already had my languages with me. I had my master's degree with me in creating a new counseling concept called the 3 C's. And in this particular segment, per request, I hear you, Ashley, and we are preparing for that I have my domain in the use of my fluency in Portuguese up and down from the Amazon down to the border to Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, and to the Bolivian border, and so forth. And this segment here, I'm trying to speak in the next 25 minutes about what had developed above and beyond my concentrated field when I started with a meager $3,000 by buying amethyst at $1 per carat. Buying well, focus, concentrate from this meager $1 per carat, one of the lowest cost of stones, and yet have the highest, richest purple color in the family of quartz. I managed to have grown my business in less than 5 to 6 years into the multi-million-dollar business. And here is some of the ventures beyond Brazil. As I said, as a rule of thumb, people always ask me, what is the best buy? How do you know you have the best buy? I'll repeat, it's a very basic concept. First, Gemmeconomics about how much you have in your pocket. And let me get it started. I started with $3,000. What can I buy with this $3,000? What was my focus? In a very quick study, I managed, including losses, I spent $3,000 within 4 days in the mining towns in the state of Minas Gerais. The town I started is Governador Valadares and Teofilo Otoni, which is the northeast, heading northeast in the state, going directly to the border of Bahia and the state of Espírito Santo, with the capital city of Vitoria, whereby the Bahia, we are very south of the Bahia, Spica state. So in the region, all the quality of quartz, all the minerals, and one of the major takeoff in the way in terms of moving dirt and earth and shaking up the region with the enlarging the gemstone procurement has started with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because during the Second World War, the Japanese had dominated Burma Trail and stopped one of the strategic minerals at that time is the mica. And from that point, eventually the American moved into Brazil to looking for the second sources of supply of mica, which is an insulin from the old iron to the furnace with the transparency. This particular mineral is. I love it. In fact, I just love the raw mica with the multiple color. When you're projecting into using a projector, they have different kind of patterns of brownish red, burn colors, or the black is a beautiful, just a beautiful form of stones. From that area, when I was starting at $3,000, I looked at the 5 lowest cost gemstones in the gem market. Amethyst is one, is purple. When the amethysts are not well colored, have different zones, by heating it, the trace minerals, whichever could be iron, could be manganese, and then you turn into citrine. And the citrine color can be pale yellow, darker yellow to the kind of reddish. So even erroneously, most people at that time speaking of this yellowish quartz, which is a burnt amethyst, by calling them topaz. And then there are the real topaz from Ouro Preto, south of the capital city of Minas Gerais, in the beautiful town, very gorgeous in a neoclassical, in a city called Ouro Preto. I will speak of that later. But the next color from these amethyst citrine to the one other stones, reddish, used to call the poor man's ruby, named garnet. And garnet, by me, coming from Brazil, we call it granada. And the word nada means nothing. For me, it was always been a stone of nada, not worth touching. At least on my personal economic standpoint, I will purchase it. I will have some when people request it, or when something show up with a 10, 20, 15 carat, big size, just a brown, reddish stone, a stone without translucency and transparency. Maybe what I'm buying is the spirit of a stone. It doesn't matter how this cut, but the balance, the symmetry, and I'm still very much in love till today. The natural cutting format called the Portuguese round cut, the facets, the table and the pavilion and the bottom, the stone is the most brilliantly cut with all the reflections of the gemstones. So repeat: amethyst, citrine, burnt amethyst, and then we have the granite, and then mixed another low costly stone, but never big size stone, was again in the mild but not well light, and it's a yellowish green. If the yellow going too much into the yellow, people call it the pea green. stone called in the family of olivin. In the French word, it's peridot, Peridot. At that particular time in point, the peridot in smaller sizes in quantity were producing near Arizona, near the San Carlos Indian reservation, where I have my sort of partnership between me and Helmut Zimmermann from Germany when we were engaged in the development of the next topaz. The topaz is basically white, but in the same category is about cost around $1 up and down in the price range. But in the topaz, the white topaz become very in demand because the stone is raw mineral. We extract them, we buy them, we cut them, we shape them, and then we bring up to the U.S. At that time, we treat the stone in San Diego in a linear accelerator, which cost about 35 cents. But the stone white topaz, when cutting, is about 20 cents, 25 cents. So after the treatment, transportation, so back and forth, damages, or whatsoever, your cost is still under $1 US. And in the linear accelerator, the sky blue topaz very much is similar to a soft color aquamarine. But with the trained eye, you can see there's major differences. And from the linear accelerator for the stone, let's say rejected by the linear accelerator that did not turn blue, have a quasi color, brownish, white, or just color that never took to the treatment of the linear accelerator, can be treated again into the process now we call in the nuclear reactor, which is highly dangerous because in the early stage, many of the stone were released by the nuclear treatment without the cooling down. So the stone oftentimes were radioactive, and they can cause much damage, knowingly to the dealer or not. They were just much of the eventually causing cancer, causing blindness, and all sorts of trouble, which is a stone of risk. Well, eventually, the industry has started to regulate it a little bit better. But in between the two treatments, there's another treatment that we use in Sao Paulo, Brazil at that time. It's called the Cobalt 60, which is a irradiation, low dosage to clean all the surgical tools for the medical field. And very few people knew, and that's another niche. When you treat this topaz, a percentage of 30-40% can come out to be blue, and pretty pleasant blue. But for the most part, there's a 70-60% rejection. The color never become white, brownish, gray. Is just an ugly, ugly stone. I take this range of the stone under $1 production, including the topaz, which came later in my life, but the first 5 years, 6 years, then topaz was involved. When I making the attempt, just by accident, one of my colleagues, friends in the Interphilatonia say, "Hey, Paul, would you try this?" I mean, they gave me for free. Let's find out and explore if this stone can take after the cobalt, which is quite a few. There was hundreds of thousands of carats that have been treated in Sao Paulo, rejected when sitting around all the offices without any application. I took about 1,000 carats of that previously treated in cobalt 60 Sao Paulo, bring it to the U.S. Now, there's a little bit of human cunningness or cleverness, but remember, every time you're cunning, your cunningness can be surpassed by someone is much more cunning than you, much smarter than you. In order to identify my stones without my treater knows what I'm doing, I have that particular batch of the stones sacrificing, removing some of the free forms, meaning they're not oval, they're not rectangular, they are not round. And by putting this assortment of the brownish pre-treated cobalt stones into the mix, I do not want my treater, the irradiation part, the coordinator, They are just all in the pedrismo. Now, pedrismo is my term called pedra, stones, meaning the bullshit, thieving industry mindset. So by mixing in the stones without him knowing what stones were coming over São Paulo, Embrahage. Embrahage stands for Empresa Brasileiras de Irradiação. So, wow, those stones come out amazingly beautiful. Imagine, I have no cost of the stone by this 1,000 carats of sample. It's almost 80% coming of the most brilliant blue and creating a new color between the sky blue, the London blue, which we call eventually Swiss blue, which commands much higher value than just $2 or $3, up to $5, $6, $8, $10 per carat, depending where you have the stone sold. So in this segment, you basically have a little bit of understanding that I gauge my capacity, my capital limited starting at $3,000, and time to spend the $3,000, I spend approximately 5 days a week. And per my return to the US, I have turned the $3,000 within 30 days time to become $4,000 to $5,000. Subtracting the $1,000 travel, very frugal, airfare $800, ground travel, riding 24-hour bus is about $35, $40. I still travel comfortably. And that is how I started my basic gem economy. As time go on, by the increase of my 3,000 to 6,000, that means that doubling the capital after all expenditure travel, I repeat. And this time from the $6,000, I had doubled it into 12,000, so on and so forth. And this is the sort of a linear acceleration of my performance. And then I cut off my exposure for the longest time, no more than $20,000. With whatever I make, I bring back with me $20,000 cash, even with vendors offering me triple the amount, or just take along this package of $20,000. I pay you $1,000 that basically pay for my airfare. I limited my liability and not to overused my risk capital. I call this discipline. And as I have been an educator, I have been an athlete, and many other influence forms that had trained me to stay in court on the right course for the shortest time. And then with all this development, I jump a little bit, the venture about and beyond, and because the languages, I'm already 4 or 5 years into the business. By 1979, I also have opened one of the a $3 million base cost inventory store in Palm Beach, Florida, with one of my friends from Chicago, the owner of Birdie Brothers Bakery, who sold the company to Kraft Foods. And then he is a multi-millionaire, but decided to opening a store in Palm Beach, where he resides in Boca Raton. That's another venture. But this part of it had added the new dimensionality where with Bob and I had gone to China. We shopped for the basic artifacts because 77 opened my China West. In the same time and period, many of the very exciting Chinese goods, 50% still in stone forms, such a pair of a size of lion rose quartz lions carved in Beijing. And with the develop and train eye from my engagement with 6 and more of the Chinese company named China Arts and Crafts, starting from Hong Kong. Then I meet up with the Chinese Arts and Craft from Guangdong, in Canton, Guangzhou. And then I have gone to Shanghai to handpick some of the stuff that I value, and then head on to Tianjin, and from Tianjin back to the headquarters in Beijing. So 79, second year into my business, we opening a $3 million store, including a $1.5 million consignment from my contacts, from my sister's boss, another known agent group of gemstone buyers, and his neighbor, where we have over $600,000 of jewelry once belonged to the family of Mary Pickford. And personally, I hated that stuff because in a few pieces, products in the estate jewelry end of it, when I picked up what was available of made by Cartier, the items sit in our Palm Beach store on Worth Avenue, on one of the most prestigious streets in the retail area. Every single piece of my Cartier picked sold. And the Pickford pieces, eventually, under the promise, we can return it. That, again, even at my early stage, my taste, by our evaluation, what is saleable, time and again, Cartier's pieces has surpasses 90% of the goods made in the US. But that's another story. But because of this purchase, I was 29 years old, and I wrote a check in Hong Kong at $350,000 to the China Arts and Craft branch in Hong Kong. Well, for a lot of the Chinese perspective, I never thought about the age, image, prestige, and I was a very young and wrote a very big check, and then opened up all the doors into China. And subsequently, I have continued on for 10 years in the major shopping spree into every April, spring Canton Fair. With my awareness of the stones, with my potential engaging China with different stones from Brazil, by their request, I visited the agate country in southern part of Brazil, where China was evaluating, appreciating agate, where in Brazil we had millions and millions in tonnage plus acreage of the agate producing region located in the province of Rio Grande do Sul and between two cities, the Soledade and Lajeado. And that had opened up my other engagement with a consistent supply sources of amethyst from the region, and the commerce had been cultivated, groomed, distributed, namely by the German gemstone merchants from Edo Oberstein. And this is in what the time I have here now. I will try to continue in a later date. I will show my audience here how I have learned the obsolescence in the Gemmeconomics, where I have witnessed in my discovery accidentally when I was in Germany in Niederwurzbach, Edo Oberstein, when I first engaged the vendors, the salesmen coming up from Nigeria with their quantities of aquamarines, where at that particular time and point, the aquamarines can cost us in Brazil between $15,000, $10,000, $20,000 per kilograms. They were selling for less than $5,000. And this particular engagement is the color of the aquamarine, where I have seen some of these Nigerians in the very modest, very poor conditions, carrying kilograms and kilograms of the aquamarine onto the streets in Germany. Without malice, the German stone cutters friends I become acquainted from the fairs in Tucson, in Basel, and in other gem shows, sitting by their sides and almost making their ideas to how to buy well for the stones. It's no malice. They just want to buy well. They know this is going to be a shocking price, a very good price, but they want to team up amongst the few buyers to buy a certain limited price so they can all share the low cost abundance of supply coming out from Nigeria. And this particular exposure had took me eventually to guide and walk through some of these Nigerians into the next enclave or the next Asian, open the door to them in Asia, in Bangkok, and also in Hong Kong, where I have stayed 15 years on I'm not going to call it the best hotel, but it's one of the top hotels in Hong Kong, called Sheraton on Nathan Road. And right behind me is a building called Chongqing Mansion. And by God, that was the rooms that can sleep 8 people, and they are basically paying what I'm paying $120, $150 US dollars per night. They were paying about 50, and then you can subdivide that into the 6 and 8s in the split. This is all part of Gemmeconomics. What I value my experience is across the entire color spectrum, from the garimperos, the simple, the miners, the diggers, that literally whole diggers in the mines in Brazil, to this quasi garimpero into Germany, and to see their development from the $5,000-$7,000 per kilo aquamarine, where I have managed also to benefit a part of it by paying a $10,000-$12,000, which is half the price I pay to Brazil. And for a duration of time, this kind of impact of a new show of stones, impact, of course, when you go to Germany, you go to the German aquamarine stockholders, long time, 200 years from Brazil, you can see by the mineral specimen they have in their drawers, marked down the name, Uncle Otto, 1942, 1945. And likewise, when you look at the same stone, are showing up to your doors at 1/5 or 1/2 the price. Some of the impacts will have a short-term impact and then vanish. And the old stocks, the old powerhouse of the inventory with inventory depth for 40, 50 years continues. So this is the part I think at this time and moment I can make some contribution to alert the incoming people who are engaged in the gem trade, be that a simple buy and sell in Tucson or any rock and mineral shows in North Carolina. We have visited all that, to the sophisticated Moscone Center in San Francisco, Java Center in New York, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai. We can do all the name dropping. It makes no difference. You just have to find your way to engage with what you have economically. You cannot compete with me. When I started my shop in 1977, I was paying gold and $48 an ounce. Gold today is $2,400 plus, and I foresee gold can go to $3,000, depending on the dollar situation and depending on the rise of the up and coming global south and the BRICS monetary switch. And the story I will also tell, how I manage and guided by smart and people with the best intention to buy the best looking olivine, the peridots from China, not China per se, but the China is between the border of North Korea and China. And that is the only time in my life I have more than 50 good-sized peridots, ranging from 8-carat size to 22-carat sizes. And let me stress, Not one stone have any inclusions. And this particular purchaser is out of my domain. Another one out of my domain also, I have bought tremendous amount of opals, but I never bought. I swap, I trade, counter trade, barter with our tourmalines, with the Australian opals. So the I hope by tomorrow I will be able to give you another version, continue on this outside of Brazil engagement with the gemstones, with Nigeria, with South Africa, with North Korea by way of China, and all up into Hong Kong and Bangkok, along with my cutting factory in the northwest side of Bangkok, into a town called Mesai, which is near the city of Chiang Mai. Beautiful country. And my encounter with the acreage and the acreage of the opium field, where also every time before we go up to Chiang Mai, when I visit my factory, my partner asked me to have my passport putting back in the hotel and not bring it up, because the trouble in the Golden Triangle between the infighting of the different tribes, the ethnic warring, plus the suspicion of the U.S. Drug Administration and also the CIA about the traffic, arms and guns, plus the opium in the region. So I will stop, and I would like to continue tomorrow with the added stories about the trades above and beyond my domain outside Brazil. But not to forget, I've also invested my time trading investment, exploring the best amethyst in the world, south of Rio Grande do Sul, 7 hours from Soledad de Lajeado, in a town called Artigas, Uruguay, where the German had named one of the best color amethysts after what they found in the old days in Siberia. Have a good day.